Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. And today, we're being joined by Tim Minneci, author of The Black Sky, coming in August 2020. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Well, Tim, we are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to begin?
I am.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, I would give them a lot of advice, but the one that really stuck with me that was given to me by another author was build a schedule into your life and stick to it as best as you can for writing. And for me, it was the cliched, I was writing on lunch breaks at work, and I would do it late at night after my family went to bed. And it was just a matter of getting something down on the page every day. Even if it was incoherent nonsense, at least I got something that I could go back and edit rather than just having a blank page, because blank pages build up, and it tended to, stifle me for a while. So I kept at it, and that really helped me get over the hump where first I was doing 500 words a day. Then it was 750. Then it was 1,000 words. And I got into a much better flow by staying on a schedule and not trying to be perfect and have everything figured out ahead of time. Sometimes I was just spitting things out, making sure that I got something done. And then the next day I would go, well, half of this is worth keeping, and I'm going to rewrite what I did yesterday.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think the hardest thing is for people, and myself included, is being honest with yourself about what the prospective market is for your book. So when I went out with my first book, Power Ballad, back in 2013 to agents, I had talked with people I knew who had published and said, what should my approach be? And they gave me their feedback, and they said, here are some names, because I was in the same sort of music nonfiction book category as they were. And I got some real honest feedback where they said, this sounds like an interesting book. I publish books of the same style, but I feel like this might be a little too small of a niche to draw an audience that would be worth us as a publisher coming on and making money on this. So that was a good lesson, because it was my first time out and I was just excited about writing what I wanted to write. And I ended up doing it myself, self-publishing through Amazon, because that feedback made me realize, okay, well, I think in terms of future projects, I need to decide what is for myself and what do I want to reach a more broader audience. So the things that I have done on my own have been very personal, and I'm not really worried about whether I was going to reach a whole bunch of people versus I have something that I think is worth reaching a lot of people. I'm going to go much farther with it in terms of reaching out to agents and publishers.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your previous book launches that has worked well.
Sure. So for that Power Ballad release, I knew that I was hamstrung by the fact that it was a smaller market, but I knew that there were really dedicated fans of that music genre that would be into reading the book. So while I was sending it out to book bloggers and I was sending it out to certain people that would review the book, I also had to think in terms of other media that I could use to promote the book, which is also what I'm doing with the current book, The Black Sky. In the case of the Power Ballad book, I launched a podcast, a limited series podcast, where I interviewed people who were relevant to the book. So I had musicians on who had written power ballads in the 80s, and we did interviews and we talked about what went into writing those power ballads. And I was able to reach a completely different audience, people who listen to podcasts and who listen to music podcasts that maybe wouldn't have read the book, but now they might get interested in the book. And I'm doing the same thing with The Black Sky. The Black Sky has a sci-fi dystopian post-apocalyptic element to it. So I reached out to some friends and I was like, what can I do to expand my, reach with this? And they were like, well, you need to build a real world component. Think about in terms of, can you build websites for these characters and social media? Can they actually exist in the real world? And that was a really important step in terms of me being able to say, I have a book, but I also have this other thing going on that you're going to get interested in as a reader or as a reviewer that makes this a little bit more unique than just a book coming out.
So to clarify, this is a specific limited series podcast that you're doing just in correlation with the book launch of the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Power Ballad one was back in 2013. I did a limited series for that. And it was like 6 interviews, once, released like three episodes before the book came out and 3 episodes after the book came out. And then for the new book, it's a whole, like, I would say real world Easter egg filled experience for people to go. There are actually aspects of the book that's coming out in 2020 that you can find little Easter eggs in the book, and then they will lead you to additional adventures, let's say, outside the book.
I think that's absolutely ingenious. And you are the first guest, this is episode 550, that has ever brought up specifically doing a limited series podcast. We've had other people that have utilized their podcast with their book, but it's already been a pre-established podcast. And obviously the book's going to be a little different area. But I love the fact that this is specifically a limited series just for this book.
Yep, and I already had a podcasting career. That's a weird way to put it. But I already had a podcast that I could say, hey, by the way, you're listening to this podcast, go check out this other podcast that'll be a limited run. Sort of like the way that, you'll watch a show on HBO and they only do 1 season of it. And I wanted to say, like, this is just a 1-season podcast. You're not going to get, 50, 100 episodes of this. I'm just doing this. These are going to be really special episodes. Are going to really put a lot of production effort into these, and it's going to be a little bit more produced rather than just a weekly sit down and chat type podcast. We're going to go a little deeper than that. So, and it got a good response, and I the world that I was trying to reach definitely connected to it.
Well, and I see that a lot, like a current series that's out right now, not a podcast series, but a special documentary series about The Last Dance, about the Chicago Bulls with their final year together, which has done just huge ratings for ESPN. And that's a 10-episode series. And it sounds like this is very similar to that, but in podcast form, specifically about this book. I just think that's absolutely genius.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. It was work, but I was glad to do it because it was fun, but it also helped the book. So
I'll ask you one more follow-up question with that too. Did you have specific calls to action with those podcast episodes as well?
I was always mentioning, where you could get the book. Obviously, when you publish through Amazon, it's a little bit more limited in terms of their distribution. You're basically just using Amazon for the distribution as opposed to if you go through a different distributor. But there was always like a tag with regards to here's where you can go get the book. If you like it, please go here to leave a review, whether it was Amazon or Goodreads. And I was also doing giveaways at the time. So if, you listen to this, I would do a promotion before the episode and say, hey, make sure you listen to this episode because at the end, we're going to be giving away a copy. All you need to do is listen for the email address at the end of the episode and then send an email, and all the emails will be compiled and we'll pick a winner. That sort of thing was going on at that time. So there was some interaction with the listener that was combined with the episodes that were being published.
Got it. Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, that's tough. That's like trying to pick a favorite movie or a favorite album. I could probably not do it in a in a logical way that would make me stick to it. And then next week I would have a new one based on whatever my likes were. But one of my favorite books and one of the books that really impacted writing The Black Sky is Andy Weir's The Martian. I started writing the book in 2011 and then I stopped in 2012. I just got sort of burnt out on what I was trying to do with it. I couldn't crack it, but I had the idea. I put it down, and then I saw the trailer for The Martian, the movie, that it was based on a book, which I was really interested because I love space stuff, space travel, sci-fi, anything. I picked up the book. I read it in like 3 days, which is incredibly fast for me. And I started wanting to know what did Andy Weir write? What else? I want to read his other books. Well, it turns out he didn't have any other books at that point, but he had a website, and he talked about how he wrote The Martian chapter at a time and posted them online for people who were reading his blog to read and give him immediate feedback. And I thought, well, that's a genius way to do it if you're sort of, a little bit unsure of where you're going, and you want to make sure that you're not going to write 300 or 400 pages and then end up with junk. So I took that same approach. I rewrote my first couple chapters, and then I started posting them on my blog and on social media, like on Facebook and Twitter. And I would get people who would write, I like what you're doing, or I'm curious to see where this character is going to go. And it helped me develop certain storylines and characters in ways that I might not have thought of. And it also helped me write each chapter into an interesting problem that I then had to figure out coming into the next chapter. So there was a lot of like cliffhangers at the end of each chapter, so the reader would stay interested, and then I would also have to come up with something interesting to keep them occupied for the next chapter. So that was a really big boost to getting it finished, because I finished them within a year after having read that he had worked that way.
Well, and the cool thing about The Martian is he actually published that himself. He did not go through a publisher. He did it
Correct.
himself. He built his audience, became a script, and then it's one of my favorite movies too. So that's just a great example of what you can do with, getting the book out there yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, I have a favorite band. They're called the Tragically Hip from Canada. And there is a song called Ahead by a Century. And there's a lyric that I have actually on my wall next to my desk. And it goes, "No dress rehearsal. This is our life." And I've always I heard that song in 1996, and that has always stuck with me, that you kind of get one shot, so you might as well take it. It sort of ties into that Wayne Gretzky quote that you miss, 100% of the shots you don't take. I firmly believe you just got to go for it. Even if you're not 100% when you start, you'll get to 100% along the way. So I've always loved taking on a new challenge, and writing the novel was the newest challenge that I wanted to put to myself. So that was my latest shot.
Well, Tim, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, thanks for having me. Website is timminneci.com. That's TIMMINNECI. And then you can find me at Twitter and Instagram at Tim Minneci. And then also I have a Facebook author page, just Timothy Minneci. And that's where I'm at.
Well, Tim, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.